Hello, and welcome to this inaugural event of the Far and Away series for 2020-2021. If you're not familiar with FAR, we are the Facility for Arts Research. We're a part of the College of Fine Arts at Florida State University. FAR is made up of faculty from across the college and also our co-directors. That's me, Denise Bookwalter, and Judy Russian, and also our operations manager, Marty Fielding. And so together we have this kind of, or at least part of our mission is to engender and support collaboration. And one of the ways that we do that is through this Far and Away Visiting Artist series that we've done for 3 years now, I think. And the way that we normally do it in normal times is to invite an artist here for about a week, and we have them talk with anyone that they're interested in talking with. So faculty, scholars, researchers, students, members of the larger community outside of FSU. And then, hopefully the idea is that during their time here, that'll spark some kind of collaboration that can live beyond that short time that they're visiting. So that's how we do it in normal times. This year, we're doing it differently. Obviously, it has to be done online, but we thought rather than having a series of recorded lectures where people present their work, we would do something else. And our goal was to, again, talk about collaboration and have even the presentations be collaborative. So if you're watching on YouTube right now, you can submit something in the chat and we'll see it. And through the course of the event, you can chat and we'll integrate that into the discussion that happens. So that is the event, a discussion. We invited an artist to come and also to give us the name of someone that they would like to be in conversation with, to have a talk in this public forum. And then we in turn invited that person to be a part of it, and that's what we'll see tonight. Before I introduce tonight's event, I also wanted to give you an idea of what else is happening, who else is coming during this year, and then I'll introduce the people for tonight's event. So on November 10th, we will have Noel W. Anderson, printmaker and sculptor, along with gallerist Jane Johnson. They'll be having a conversation on November 10th. On January 19th, Related Tactics, which is made up of Michelle Carlson, Nate Watson, and Weston Taruya. They are going to be talking about their work, creating collaborative projects, interventions, and all at the intersection of race and culture. So they'll be telling us about their work in this kind of discussion format. And then finally, on February 9th, Elliott Reed and Ron Athey. This is going to be an interesting event with two performance artists. Elliott Reed from New York and Ron Athey is known from his performance work over the decades in LA. And so those are the events that will be happening in the next few months. So on to tonight's event. I wanted to introduce our two participants, speakers, conversationalists, Kelly Lloyd and Yalie Kamara. Sorry, let me bring up their bios here. Kelly Lloyd is a multidisciplinary conceptual artist who focuses on issues of representation and knowledge production and prioritizes public-facing collaborative research. Lloyd received a dual MFA in painting and MA in visual and critical studies from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in 2015 and earned a BA from Oberlin College in 2008. In 2019, she completed the Star Fellowship at the Royal Academy Schools, had solo exhibitions at the Royal Academy Schools in London, Crybaby in Berlin, Bill's Auto in Chicago, and Dirty House in London. She lectured at Edinburgh College of Art and the Ruskin School of Art, collaborated on public programming at Rum 46 in Aarhus, Raven Row in London, and Block 336 in London, and was granted a Foundation for Contemporary Art Emergency Grant, the Art Licks Work Week Prize, and a STEP travel grant. She began her PhD in fine art at Oxford this fall, right now. Yalie Kamara is a Sierra Leonean American writer, researcher, and a native of Oakland, California. She's the author of a brief biography of my name, which was included in New Generation African Poets, a chapbook box set, and When the Living Sing in 2017. She has received fellowships from the Vermont Studio Center, Callaloo, and the National Book Critics Circle, and was a finalist for the Brunel African Poetry Prize. She earned an MFA in creative writing from Indiana University in Bloomington, and is a doctoral student as well in creative writing and English literature at the University of Cincinnati. Again, contribute through the chat as they're having their conversation, and we'll include your questions where we can. And without further ado, welcome to Kelly Lloyd and Yalie Kamara.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everybody at FSU. Thanks especially to Rob and Marty. Thank you, Rob, for all of the technical, all of the things. And yeah, I'm Kelly Lloyd.
And I'm Yalie Kamara.
And cool, got that. So today what we're going to do is we are going to tell you, sorry. Also, I'm in Oxford right now, so it's like 12:08 p.m. So sorry if I'm like a little bit slow. Drank some coffee before this. So Yalie and I are going to tell our friendship origin story. And then after that, we have each looked at each other's work and chosen a pair. So like I've read, some of Yalie's writing and chosen one piece of writing that, reminds me or made me think of one of my pieces, and then Yalie vice versa. And our pieces, including Yalie's writing, are going to be on the screen. But then also Yalie is going to read her writing. And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about those pairs. We'll ground the conversation in, a discussion of one another's work. And then quite soon after, we're just going to take questions every 10 minutes. So, if you do have any questions, just pop them in the chat, and Rob will, condense them and regurgitate them back to us. And then hopefully we can get to a number of your questions. And we really did just want to build the conversation around your questions. So thanks for coming. Yalie, do you want to tell them about us?
Yeah, I can totally do that. So thank you also to FSU and to the Fine Arts Department and Robert Duarte and Marty Fielding, who've been doing a whole lot of work putting this together. And also Kelly Lloyd for inviting me to this wonderful talk and conversation. And so, yes, we're going to start with our friendship origin story. So Kelly and I have known each other for 17 years. So we met at Oxbow School, at the Oxbow School in Napa, California, which is an arts boarding school that is a semester long for juniors and seniors. And yeah, so we met there. I'm trying to figure out the first few times we met, or what drew me to Kelly. Kelly had very short hair. And it reminded me of my mother, so I automatically trusted her because they had very similar, beautiful hair. And I remember Kelly having just a really radiant smile, and she also had very cool socks and amazing artwork. And I was allergic to oil painting, so I couldn't really do it at Oxbow. We found out when they had to take me to the ER, but I was always jealous and admirable of people who could do oil painting, and Kelly was one of them. So I learned a lot about color from Kelly and zoom into color, and also just our friendship grew from there. And I hadn't met too many young Black teenagers, girls that call themselves visual artists. And so it was really amazing for me to meet Kelly and to be able to just start to understand what it was that was oil painting and visual arts. And since then, we've had a really wonderful, lovely time visiting each other wherever we've dwelled, most places we've dwelled. So I've been to Gaithersburg High. Poolsville High. There we go. I've been to Gaithersburg, Maryland, home of Logic. Everybody's impressed that I've been to Gaithersburg. And also she's visited me during my undergrad at UC Riverside, and we've spent time in DC, spent time in Brazil and France together, and I'm sure some other places, but it's been wonderful to have such a close friend, to be able to see at different parts of our lives. And now we're probably maybe the furthest we've ever been apart for a sustained period of time, maybe one of them, but our friendship endures. And so it's just been wonderful to have a friend and a confidant, and someone who continues to blaze forward in the world of arts, a Black woman that is a friend and also an inspiration. And so that is part of my origin story with Kelly and friendship.
Whoa. I don't really beautifully said. I'm just gonna follow that up with I remember Yalie wore her prom dress like on a Thursday for lunch or something like that at Oxbow. And I just remember, being like, she's great. And then, pursuing a friendship with her. And so we've been able to, over the past 17 years, talk, I feel like we talk like regularly, and then we don't talk for like a couple of years or something, and then we like come back online. And so for the past couple of months, we've been able to catch up like once a month, and that's been really lovely and also really critical for me, as somebody who's not living at home, and, as somebody who, was kind of cut off from a larger conversation around the arts. And so I just really have enjoyed our conversations. So, I feel like today you're truly just like kind of dropping into a conversation that we would be having anyways. And then I feel like, Yalie, didn't you want to ask a question that was like to us, about like our time at Oxbow and if we are still like the same artists that we were then, or?
Yeah, so I feel like that question had many iterations, so I'm gonna try to remember the last iteration of that question, but it was just thinking about how we saw ourselves or perceived ourselves at that age, maybe 16 and 17, if we saw ourselves as artists, and also maybe how the world perceived us at that time. I think that was the question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you that and then I'll respond.
Okay, cool. I was definitely an artist at that time. I was like 16. I became a vegan. I like shaved off all of my hair. I wanted a nose ring. It was a very fundamental, it was a very fundamental time for, or foundational time for like trying to sculpt my identity and present it in front of other people. And I was thinking about this one thing that happened at Oxbow that really kind of spoke to the nature of my process, that was obviously evolving then and is still evolving, but now I can reflect back on it and be like, oh yeah, that was for sure me, like I'm the same exact person. So our sculpture professor at the Oxbow School, Patrick, gave me like a bad grade for like the midterms. I found this slip of paper, when I was like 22, and read it and like cried, and then like folded the slip of paper back up and like put it into a box. But it said like, Kelly just doesn't know how to finish things. Or like she seems to lose interest like before things are done. And then I remember for my Oxbow final project, I would I filmed myself making a work of art every day, and then I would erase it, and then I would do it again. So I did that for an entire week, took a video, and then I projected that onto this like blank canvas. And I feel like it really was a statement about like what is finished anyways. And then also, at that time, there was like this coffee shop around the corner called the Java Hut. And you used to get this like super huge like mochaccino, like I don't even know if there was any coffee in it, but and so I just wanted to like go and hang out with my friends and like get a mochaccino, and I think that's still like my art practice. I think I do try to privilege like relationships with people over like a certain definition of what an artwork should be at the end. And so I just remembered that and thought about how, maybe I definitely was an artist back then, because I feel like I was, forming some of the ideas that are really fundamental to my practice now. Yalie, what about you?
I feel like I was beginning to feel that way, that I was a writer. And I think it was because of the spaces that I'd been in before I got to Oxbow, particularly with Youth Speaks, maybe during my junior and senior year, and having opportunities to take workshops and be able to write and participate in slams. And actually, I think what made me feel like a writer is because I felt like people wanted to they were interested in what I was saying or listening to what I was saying. And I think that um, it really meant a lot to me as a high schooler to be able to have the attention of adults. And it felt like it was re-articulating a power structure. And so that was very special to me to be able to just talk about the things that brought me joy or displeasure and have people to listen, and also to be able to have peers that were affirming my writing too. And being at Oxbow, there were folks there that wrote, but it was largely visual art. So I think what Oxbow introduced me to is the opportunity to think about, I don't know, like the multimodality of writing. So what does it mean if you're doing, if your writing is placed against images? I'd never thought of that before. I used to just think about the writing on the page, but what happens when you juxtapose images, or images are superimposed on top of words? And so all these different things started to open up for me. And I think that maybe that point, and even doing printmaking and trying to like incorporate text in printmaking. So there's all these ways where I started to think about how large writing was and how much I didn't know about the ways of representing messages. And I think that having the support of Oxbow, and I hope Stephen's in the audience. Hey, Stephen. Anybody else at Oxbow that may have showed up, really meant a lot to me to have that continuous affirmation, even being maybe like one of the writers in the program in a largely visual space. That was really amazing. And yeah, absolutely. And I miss all the food there.
Yeah,
I don't think I've eaten well since. I don't think I've eaten well since, but yeah, I think that's how I'd answer that question.
Cool. Should we move on to your pair?
Yes. So in thinking about how our work is in dialogue or in conversation, which is a wonderful question that Kelly asked, and it was really, really amazing to think about this. Kelly, I may have to lean on you to describe wall of respect just a little bit, and then maybe I can start talking about why I chose this particular image. Just if you just want to talk about it for like just a few seconds.
Oh yeah, I have prepared some notes here. So what you're seeing right now is part of a larger work of art where and pull tabs are a form that I use quite often. And so I made, I don't know, maybe 17 pull tabs that are available on my website that you can just like download. And this is one of them. And each one of the pull tabs features a quotation from a person who's on the Wall of Respect. And so the Wall of Respect was a mural in Southside Chicago on the southeast corner of 43rd Street and Langley Avenue, to be specific. It was painted in 1967 by the Visual Arts Workshop of the Organization of Black American Culture, and was torn down in 1971 when an accidental fire destroyed the building that the mural was painted on. The Wall of Respect included images of Black heroes and heroines, from poets and musicians to sports players and activists. The mural was a community gathering site, which also served as the backdrop to speakers, concerts, and protests. And so I got brought on to this project by one of my mentors, Dr. Romy Crawford, who has done work around the Wall of Respect, including co-authoring and co-editing the book, The Wall of Respect, Public Art and Black Liberation in 1960s Chicago, with Abdul Al-Klamat and Rebecca Zorak, and that's available through Northwestern Press.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And so it was really, really quite an experience going through the different figures that Kelly has on her website and trying to guess what the pull tabs would say, which I wasn't always successful at, which is a fun game in any case. But I was really taken, there were a few that really spoke to me, but one that I was really taken by was the one that's on the screen now by Kwame Ture, which says the first need of a free people is to define their own terms. And that made me think a lot about a poem that I'd written called New America. And it was a poem in which I was sort of wishing or manifesting for things that I would have wanted, or that I do want as a child of immigrants, first generation American. Where is the agency in sort of demanding things from this country if your family was not originally from this country? And so I was thinking a lot about that. And it's a poem that started off as maybe a prose block. And I kept on thinking, why not take up more and more space in this? And so I kind of exploded the words out. And you guys will be able to read the poem alongside. But the idea, what really stuck out to me, again, to just reiterate why I chose the Touré quote, was because I felt like this poem was a defining moment in just in having agency, or being able to demand or declare things, and to also like use the imperative of give me, give me, give me over and over again in a way that feels like at times marginalized communities can't say give me, and it's usually can I, or may I please, or will you. And so so just a way of just thinking about what it'd feel if I were freer, and how can I demand things that I didn't necessarily see in my own childhood. So I'll go ahead and read the poem alongside you all. New America. And I won't be looking at this screen and going back and forth. I'm just going to read off the screen so I won't make mistakes. New America. Give me a kite that will twist its leash in flight to Oakland's sapphire expanse. Give me tradition free from the thickness of horror. Trick or treat without my mother's fear of sewing pins and sedatives nestled in the chocolate's core. Give us some good news. An edited issue of the Oakland Tribune with every splayed corpse cut from its pages. Nimble fingers to make papel picado from newspapers. Christmas or Ramadan, religion that will not leave me questioned, a dance and song that make me too lovable to hurt, shears to cut, the tightrope umbilical cord, a flag whose fabric I can read, liberty or its synonym. Give me smelling salts to quell this leg of the Atlantic voyage. Give me sunscreen for my face and arms, a sturdy cradle rocking me back and forth at the shore of the Pacific, a lullaby, a hush, whisper with ocean breath that this is mine. Give me a torch to melt all the pennies saved to buy this Volvo parked in an immigrant's daydream. Give me an onyx cutlass supreme, blaring Donny Hathaway from its cushioned innards. Anthems to sing in a language that I want as my own. A black that is steadfast and opulent, which is to say dangerous and infinite. Give me a voice that will not remind my parents of their homesickness, or maybe earplugs, paper and a pen. Give me a quiet home. Give me a new America. Give our family hands that aren't scraped raw by passport page edges. Give me a new America or a new me. Give me a landmass that reeks of apple pie and bleach, a silent pledge of allegiance. Give me a license at 16, wheels and gas and a hula girl rocking on my dashboard, a Hail Mary with no map, a minute to escape the sound of my misshapen name surfing off of the cliff of every tongue, a minute to drive towards the blue, a careless twirl toward where I think I might belong.
Should we just transition to my pair? I'm not very good with transitions.
Yeah.
I actually, I don't like transitions in general. I think they try to, smooth over the edges of things where you should have actually edges of things. So speaking of, what is it, misshapen name? Is
Yeah.
that? Yeah. Could we bring up yeah, so, and then Yalie, would you mind, reading through Space, and then I'll talk about its, why I chose it, its pair?
Absolutely, I'd be very happy to. Space. At the age of 7, a letter was plucked from my name as a test to see who would catch the error, to see who'd care enough to go search for the rest of me. For about 4 months, my name appeared as Yale on the page. A part of me wonders why some names are sweeter than others and become the nectar that pools at the base of our memory. Would anyone let Zabel, Richard, Elizabeth, or Sinclair escape from the 9th letter of the alphabet? Me and my broken name, less heavy than before, began to float away to somewhere else. No search party was sent to check between the monkey bars, under the desks, my cubby, or the palms of my hands. There was no red pen to correct the flaw. Nobody else played the game, so there's no record of the joyful sound that was made when the long lost me found the small brown eye.
Yeah, so I love this poem. I think a lot about names, and I think a lot about words and the composition of words, and playing around with words, big fan of wordplay. And so maybe if we could switch to my piece. So and then I'll talk through that. and speak to your piece, Yalie, as I talk through it. So this is a piece that I've made. I've made a couple of iterations of it at this point, where I make business cards for other Kelly Lloyds. And so each one of these people in the business cards, their contact information is totally correct. So, I think a lot about my own name and how it's kind of like an invisible like thing that can disperse very easily into the world. And I think maybe when I was young and I wanted to shave my head and like become a vegan, I wanted like a distinctive name or something like that. But it's been funny learning more about my name, and I grew up in the 80s, so I was like a part of a wave of Kellys too, so that just like destroys your self-confidence when you're a kid and you're like Kelly too, but then let's see, I remember in Jurassic World, Jeff Goldblum had like a black daughter named Kelly who like saved the day by like kicking a raptor. And then so it's just been interesting kind of accumulating more and more meaning behind my name, but then also attempting to disperse it more and more. And something that I'm interested about with my name is that it's simultaneously like a very white name and then like a very black name at the same time. And so I remember like when I was living in Baltimore, the dude who delivered the post, super sweet man, he asked me like, are you from Trinidad and Tobago? And I was like, oh well, one of my ancestors is from Barbados, but like that name, if you know about it, like you can trace it to a community, whereas like maybe if I just apply to a job or something, people like, I'm not necessarily subject to the same kind of racial discrimination other people are, because my name like could be very white. And so I really just connected to your poem, Yalie, in terms of like, what does it mean to have your name lost? And lost in an error, like lost in a sea of other people who are also named that. And when are people careful with your name and when are they not careful with your name? And so I just really, and also, like these moments in your childhood where you do cling to your name as if it is actually like yours, as opposed to, some marker or something of your identity. But then obviously in New America, like you speak to that, right? Like you speak to, my name is on my passport. Like your name is, in addition to carrying your own familial history, which my name does. Like my name is Kelly because my grandmother's name is Kelly. A name also carries like a history in terms of like the time period and, like where you encounter a name like yours. So thank you for sharing it. That's why I chose it. Shall we move? Do you want tell me.
Add one more thing. So that is based on a true story. And I like the thing that I kept on thinking was, will anybody correct my name? And nobody ever corrected my name when I did that, and I know what it says about me, what type of child I was to be playing those types of games. But I mean, I think it's easy to know. I think at a young age, you can detect when you're disappeared in certain institutions. Speaking to names, in terms of that being one portion or one sort of element of names. And you also mentioned historic, significance of names and thinking about who you're named after. I also think that they also are prophetic too, like in terms of thinking about, or they sort of take us on a path. Like my name, Yalie, comes from jelly, and it's a storytelling cast of the cast of storytellers, griots, female griots, like in the western coast of Africa, and Sawida, Black girl, and Kamara means teacher. And it's just like, I never had a chance to be anything else but what I'm doing right now. So I do think that, names can be guides towards where we're going or what we are called to fulfill.
Cool. Should we go with a question?
Sure. So I love that, by the way, that your name kind of has written your history. Usually what we hear is kind of like Smith and, these names that have like some trade associated with them. I love that you're kind of destined to be a writer because of your name. There are a few questions, and I'll just pick a couple here. One is asking about your project, Kelly Lloyd, the project called Kelly Lloyd, and whether you were in contact with the Kellys, how they were a part of the project. And then a larger question earlier from Judy, asking, I think probably because you're talking about kind of your origin story and your time as younger artists and writers. And Judy asked, did you have Black role models in the arts when you were young? And is that something you thought about back then?
Yeah, really good questions. Yalie, which one do you want to do first? Or do you want to talk about Black role? What do you want to do?
Talk about the Kelly and the Kellys. Talk about that first, and then we can tag team the second one.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm in contact with one Kelly Lloyd, and the other Kelly Lloyds, I'm not in contact with them. Part of me really loves the idea that anyone who took the business cards would like call these Kelly Lloyds or email them thinking they would get me, or they were like proxies for me. So what I'm doing, and as part of my practice, is just like trolling other Kelly Lloyds. No one has gotten in touch with me to be like, please stop. So I'm going to continue. One thing did happen though, because there is two things, I guess. There is a Kelly Lloyd who was like a Miss America. And also, no, she was like a Miss America runner-up, but she was like a Miss Indiana or something. And she was a beauty queen at the time that Trump owned the like Miss America franchise. So there's a picture of her and Trump. So yeah, bottom right. There's a picture of her and Trump like hugging. And so the backs of each one of these cards are, I just Googled Kelly Lloyd and then looked at the images and then took like a screen cap of like all of us just kind of floating around together. So then in the second iteration of the piece on the back, I made sure to like include the photograph of this Kelly Lloyd and Trump like within the background. And so what happened is there was a specific period of time, I think it's gone now, might not be, try it out, where if you Google Kelly Lloyd, what shows up is my picture, like even the picture from the poster, with like the biography of the beauty queen below it. And so I kind of love that, like, and a friend of mine, emailed me with a photograph of this and was like, there's been some mistake, like, and I was like, no, this is just kind of like the natural, end of my project where I just kind of like assimilate with all other Kelly Lloyds into like a unified Kelly Lloyd. But I actually, speaking of like, like sweet names. So I had a show at the Institute for Contemporary Art in Baltimore. And rather than a typical artist talk, I was in conversation with another Kelly Lloyd, who I found because she was in like the neighborhood association of the director, Lou Joseph, of the ICA. And he was like, I know you have this Kelly Lloyd project. Like, I know this Kelly Lloyd. Like, do you want to maybe do something with her? So we got in contact with her. She's actually like an improv actor. Totally check her out. And we have the same middle name too, same spelling, like totally crazy. And so we had an artist talk together, and and then like, and as a part of the copy for the artist talk, I wrote, like the whole whatever Shakespeare like would, a rose by any other name smell as sweet, question mark. So, and then in that talk, we talked about what it meant to be somebody named Kelly Lloyd. What it meant to be somebody named Kelly Lloyd, our relationships to our names, and then how maybe our names have guided our professional paths. So it's an ongoing project. I've done a number of things with Kelly Lloyd's, but I definitely feel like it's a vessel and maybe an opportunity to connect with other people. So I do want to get in contact with other Kelly Lloyd's. If you know any, let me know. And yeah, maybe that's the next step, like more in this kind of series of projects is more artist talks with other Kelly Lloyds. Yeah. Crazy. Did you just Google that right now, Rob? Isn't that crazy? Yeah, so I'm feeling really good about just kind of like shaping reality, you know. Yalie, Black role models.
Was it Black women role models specifically?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, she didn't say. Okay. Okay. I would say I definitely have a lot more now that I'm older and I feel like have better understanding of research and feel just righteous indignation about all the missed opportunities in my education to learn about Black artists. Um, so yeah, I have a whole lot now. I'm thinking back to like younger days. I would say that my like primary influences came from family, and not even I wouldn't say even um, artists that are classically trained in artistry, but just the ways that my family's from Sierra Leone, West Africa, the ways that people speak and their dexterity with language and humor, I think, were some of my first influences. And even thinking about proverbs and expression, and those as being like influences in my work. One of my favorite, I think one of my favorite Creole proverbs is you can't what is you can't blow your nose and whistle at the same time, which essentially means you can't have it both ways, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too. But it just even thinking about the like the humor and the pithy nature of speech and how really big topics or like big topics and dilemmas can just be condensed into particularly small, compact, and powerful ways or expressions of speech. I think that would be primary influences. I'm now looking back, like in retrospect. I think another influence for me was hip hop music, and thinking about hip hop artists specifically. And I think around the middle of high school, I started to be introduced to, and I don't think any of these artists actually want to be called this, but like underground hip hop. So kind of moving away from the mainstream. And I remember in high school hearing a song called Brown Skin Lady. It's the first time I ever heard a hip hop song talking about the beauty of Black women. And even referencing cocoa butter, which was just amazing, never even hear that recorded on something. But I remember hearing that song, and I remember hearing that song from one of my closest friends at the time, and she's white. And I was like, wow, I never heard this from any Black people around me. This is so interesting. And I also thought too about access to these songs. And the other thing I thought too was, gosh, this would have really saved me in middle school when I was getting picked on for having darker skin. I didn't know that it was a beautiful thing. Beyond having your family tell you that, but you don't believe what your family tells you, not in middle school and barely in high school. But I would say my main sources of inspiration were family, and I would say hip hop music, and just like a beginning to understand what jazz music was. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, I feel like I interpreted that question in terms of like direct relationships with like professors. So I'm just gonna kind of go down that route a little bit. Yeah, I've never like I've had let's see. I've never had a Black woman like teach me painting. I'm a painter. And you know, I've had professors teach me many other things. And you know, Dr. Remy Crawford like is, you know, someone who writes about the arts, someone, you know, who's involved in the arts, but like, you know, I think about my responsibility as an educator, and why it's important for me to be in certain situations as an educator, certain studio environments as an educator, because yeah, I think, you know, speaking of like your middle school self or like your high school self, like I could have really benefited by having somebody who like was a Black woman literally be like, this is what painting is, you know. And I think that painting is such a I mean, and you know, yeah, like Western art is such a deeply racist space that I think a lot about how, you know, my tastes at this point are pretty formed, and how I need to do work to like decolonize my tastes, because, you know, I love a good, you know, minimalist sculpture and how is it that I can, you know, be more into like Ava Hesse rather than like Donald Judd or something. Like, how can I kind of shift my tastes more towards, you know, Adrian Piper rather than Saul LeWitt? Like, how can I kind of, you know, because obviously like there are people around there, you know, were people, but, you know, they may be a little, you know, they're not as easily at hand, especially when you're young and you're just like trying to figure it out. And I'm really thankful for the mentors that I have had. Like, I do think that, you know, the like Black mentors that I have had, like I feel like I mean, I have a number of mentors. I'm very thankful for them, truly. But sometimes I wonder if like the Black mentors like feel more of like a sense of responsibility over me or something. And so I don't know. It's something that I think about a lot, and I think about mostly in terms of like my role as an educator and like what schools I need to be in and what schools I do not need to be in. And yeah, so I'm gonna go with that.
There's a question here that says there's a thread of loss and reclamation of identity in your works. I imagine it's difficult to conceptualize these ideas. If you don't mind sharing, what's your process? How do you approach a project?
I feel like for me, it's like twofold. The only thing I ever write about it is home. All I ever write about is the search for home. Like, that's like my obsession. I think every writer or an artist has an obsession or two or three. The one that figures most prominently in my work is an endeavor and a search for home. And I feel like, so yeah, I'm compelled by that. So I think I'm always writing to that. And in terms of thinking about my process, I think my process is one that it takes a lot of time. I'm not a prolific writer in that I can pop out a poem like every 6 hours, like some people can. It takes me a really long time. And what I usually do, like what happens with me poems and writing is I usually think about something really thoroughly for at minimum a few months. And I just kind of, it kind of lives with me. And so it's something that lives with me in notebooks. It's something that I might record when I'm walking down the street. And I have like, I'll put on a recorder and start to record something. Or it'll pop up, yeah, just in taking notes or like a little bit on my computer. And so I think the process, what is really important with the process is time. And so I feel like one of the poems I just published, it was something that happened 5 years before. And it's something that I was able to write in a few hours, but I'd been thinking about it and returning to it amongst other things. I'm not just thinking about the poem for like 5 years straight. Life happens, all sorts of things are happening, but it's giving yourself the time to kind of turn the ideas over and over again. And what I often realize is that maybe what I thought, or in the beginning, the idea that I have is not necessarily what it ends up being, or that it kind of like, it's kind of prismatic. So you start to see all these little rays shoot out. And you realize that the idea in the poem or the idea in the writing essay, whatever, is multifaceted. So I think that time allows you to see kind of like the full array and the full scope of ideas. And so, yeah, time and the search for home, I would say, are my two answers.
I began, maybe because I didn't see myself in a lot of work, I began doing a lot of self-portraiture. But then also self-portraiture is quite natural because you're always there and you need to practice skills. And I did feel like it was and this was like pre-social media, you know, when I was learning how to paint, and it was this really beautiful process of being able to control a bit the way that people see you, or being able to like get your yeah, your bit in, you know, just like throw it in the ring with like all of the other stuff that's going on, all the other ways that people are going to see you. And I still do see a lot of the things that I make as self-portraits. Like I see the Kelly Lloyd piece as a self-portrait piece. So so I made that piece in my MFA show, and what I did is I went to Ace Hardware and scanned the back of my hand, and they came up with that paint color. And then this was the bank of elevators that you would walk in and out of on your way to the MFA show at the School of the Arts in Chicago. So I named this piece, I painted the elevators the color of my skin, and there was no marking nearby it except for like a little title tag over in the corner. So it was a hyper visible piece. It was a piece that like kind of almost existed in rumor. You know, some people didn't see it. Some people assumed it was like a design decision. But people who knew, or, you know, people who I told, or, you know, the security guards actually sat right across the way from the elevators. So I saw them a couple of times, like telling people about the piece. But that was like a way of, you know, inserting myself into the institution in this way that is similar to the way that I feel as a hyper visible person. Like, yeah, so visible as a Black person, as a woman, that I am no longer visible. And again, it's this dispersion that, you know, the Kelly Lloyd pieces are also a part of. So yeah, loss, reclamation. You know, I'm constantly trying to figure out what I'm doing with these ephemeral installations and if they serve me and the legacy that I need to have, because sometimes you don't see them. Or if this dispersion is better because they exist more as rumor rather than like a thing that you go and see and then you walk away and you forget about it. So I'm interested in, yeah, loss, reclamation, dispersion, rumor. And, you know, also at the same time, right, like this is a color field painting. It's a monochrome. It's like very classic, like painting language. So I'm also reclaiming these classic painting forms that quite often try to distance themselves away from the body and go more towards, you know, the architectural or the landscape, or, you know, or the optical. So it's like, how can I bring all of these things together into a piece that is also me? And I think that my process is like, I like going on walks, and I like wandering around and looking in people's yards and in their windows, and I like having drinks with friends and joking. You know, obviously I like going to the Java Hut and getting my like mochaccino, you know. So a lot of my you know, and I have been lucky enough to have a high level of mobility, been privileged enough. So I've traveled around a lot, and it's really fascinating to see how malleable my identity is. You know, when I visited Yalie in Brazil, I was a completely different identity than when I studied abroad in South Africa. And I was a completely different identity than like when I was living in India or when I went to go visit China, you know. And so I am still who I am, and I still identify the way that I identify, which is based in my understanding of myself in the United States, and is also, of course, based on my family. But in terms of loss and reclamation of identity, it is interesting to wander around and see how you lose yourself or don't, and when that happens, to notice it happening, and then to make a joke about it. It's not actually a joke, but you laugh at it. And then you see like what items you pick up along the way, or what scenes or what feelings or what environments, and then see how you can recreate those for somebody else in a different way.
Shout out to my little sister for that question. She just texted me and told me that she sent that. So Jenna, oh, yeah. You're the MVP. Yeah, we could talk about that, yeah. Okay, so Kelly and I were also thinking about inspiration and kind of trying to think about like all the different places it comes from. And I was thinking about Marshawn Lynch, who is, I mean, he's an international treasure, a national treasure, definitely one of Oakland's finest football player, and just all around, I really adore him. And one of the things I adore the most about him is how he claims space in spaces where athletes don't usually or not always able to claim space, and the ways that he sort of he controls rooms in particular ways. And I remember for one of our workshops, poetry workshops, the prompt that we'd been given for 1 week was to write an acrostic piece, which is a poem based on an art piece. And so I've been obsessed with one of his press releases. I think it's from Super Bowl 49 Media Day, 2015. I think the Roman numeral that I just read is 49. We'll go with it. In any case, he was getting asked all these different questions about football, sort of invasive, football-y questions. And he kept on saying, "I'm only here so I won't get fined." And I was like, this is a performance piece. I was like, this is a piece of art. He continued to say, "I'm only here so I won't get fined." And he ended up saying it 26 times in 4 minutes and 51 seconds. And at the end of it, he was like, "All right, time's up." And he left like the panel. And the piece that you have there is that is like a Newsweek story that is Marshawn Lynch gets trademark approved for "I'm just here so I won't get fined." And so that's something that spread across all different places. It was kind of like a really important maxim for a lot of people that found themselves in places that they didn't want to be, but were forced to be there for one reason or another. And it was really, really important to me and my friends, and we would send texts like, "Man, I'm only here so I won't get fined." And so I decided to write a poem based on it. But it's something that, other people in the class brought in like traditional pieces of visual arts, but I thought that this is art and it's useful art. And it's something that you can sort of use to shield yourself in particular situations. And so, yeah, so that was an inspiration for me. And I hope I can read it to Marshawn Lynch one day.
Have you come across any difficulties or any tips for collaborations between artists from two different disciplines? I don't know if you two have collaborated with each other, but surely you've collaborated with writers, visual artists, vice versa. And there's another question too: what artists or writers are figuring within your work right now? So both of those good questions.
Super interesting. Which one of those questions do you want to do first?
So one was about the collaboration. I'd be happy to talk about collaboration first.
Across discipline, yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, I'd say, and the question was if there's some tips or pointers on how to make it effective. Okay. So for me, with Kelly and I have worked together, and I've worked with other artists across disciplines, and I think that like one of the most important things has been like the dialogue, right? The dialogue and sort of like the dreaming phase, like dreaming first and thinking about like what is the objective, what are we trying to do, and what are maybe our strengths, or what are we willing to experiment with, or what are we willing to push ourselves like in terms of, I don't know, experimentation, exploration. And I think the next phase is the reality phase. So we've done the dreaming, and then the other part is the reality. Like, is this something that's possible? Like, is this feasible, given resources, time, and whatever other sort of other like elements are at play? What other dynamics are at play? And so I think like dialogue and communication, I think, is really, really important. And also just, I think like dialogue and communication is sort of boundless at the very beginning. So you don't start off with like kind of clipping your wings before you get to the production phase of it, or even seeing if it's possible to produce it. So yeah, I would say that those are the most important things to me, in terms of thinking about pointers between artists. Yeah, I'd say that that is just really clear communication.
Yeah, I feel like I would differentiate between, so I've done projects where, like I did this project at the ICA Baltimore where I asked people to send me work that was literature, like broadsheets, books, published books, self-published books. And Yalie was one of those people that sent me a book. I ended up collecting books from 100 people, and then they now form a lending library at the ICA Baltimore. But that was much, even though I was like working with other people, it was very much like my project, where I felt like it was really important to, it was my project in the sense that like I approached everybody and I was like, would you like to put this very specific thing in this larger, very specific structure? And it's not like, bring me your performative dance or whatever. And so I think that oftentimes I find it useful when I'm asking somebody else to help me with something to be very specific, because if you ask somebody like, oh, hey, like, could you just give me whatever you have? Then it's like, if somebody said that's me, like I'm thinking about all of the pieces that I've ever made. But then if you say to somebody like, oh, hey, that book that you published last year, like, do you have another copy? Would you mind putting it in this very specific context? Do you feel like it would serve you? Do you have any questions about it? Like, how can I honor your participation in this? Then it's very clear. Somebody then could be like, oh, yes or no. So I feel like just being very clear with people, if you do have something that you're going for, so that they know how they can slot in and whether they want to do it or not. And then you also have projects that you do actively with other people. And my biggest tip for that, like from the beginning, right, like Yalie was talking about clear communication, my biggest tip for that is literally to take all of the things that you wanted out of it and just like throw it out of the window. Because if you don't enter into it with an open mind, so you can actually listen to who you're talking to or collaborating with, and entertaining possibilities of a variety of different things. If your mind is so closed because you really want out of this collaboration like 3 paintings, then you're going to close a lot of doors to what it actually means to collaborate, which is like this dance and this negotiation, trying to figure out what the sum of the 2 parts is. And so, yeah, that would be just like, don't try to bound the result of a collaboration in something in particular, because you'll miss a lot of really beautiful moments and really interesting things trying to make it something that you think it needs to be. And then the other things were people who are like artists who were thinking about or like play an active role in what we're making at the moment. You know, I feel like I'm just like a broken record in terms of the people that I think about and I like, David Hammond's Always and Forever, Adrian Piper, I Blinky Palermo, and it's like, I love, like, I don't necessarily make work like them. But even though Adrian Piper and David Hammond's, I think you can see quite clearly, but I do try to think about the moments that they're able to create or the feelings that they evoke with their materiality, that then becomes something that I also try to do.
I think in terms of inspiration, I had a little list that I put together. So just a lot of it is not necessarily just poetry, but kind of thinking outside of poetry and the ways different things are treated. And so I'm doing a lot of research on Sierra Leonean Creole women's clothing. And so the textile and material culture of Sierra Leonean Creole women's clothing is something that's important to me in terms of thinking about legacy, leisure, globalization, maroon fashion, Victorian fashion, and also just thinking about looking at visual art is very helpful for me to develop, like in developing my vocabulary for writing. And so I'm looking at this has been really an inspiration for me. Also, biblical language, the Bible is an inspiration for me in thinking about the way stories are told and proverbs within the Bible. I'm of the voice for calling from the wild. That is such a far out thing to say. There's a lot of language in there, like out of context, that is so expansive and wild. So that's something that's of interest to me. I'm also interested in thinking about films and the ways that Black skin is treated in films. So I think of Daughters of the Dust, Julie Dash's work. I think also of Barry Jenkins' films, the way that Black skin is treated in Medicine for Melancholy, the Beale Street movie. I'm blanking on the title right now. It's more than Beale Street. Also thinking about Moonlight and the ways that Black skin is being treated. And also that trains my eye to think about how to write about particular parts of an experience. And so, yeah, cinema and also I'd say music from all over the place, like Ahmad Jamal right now. A lot of jazz music has been very helpful for me, and like 80s gospel music. I love looking at the hairstyles from the 80s and getting lost in Detroit Mass Choir and Mississippi Mass Choir and those old sort of looking at the archives of Blackness. And so that's something, those are just things that have been inspirations to me lately. and Lucille Clifton for poetry.
So I think, honestly, I think it's an excellent way to end, to have a bunch of names to go and track down. And so also, I don't know if you're still up for it, but Kelly and Yalie had someone's shouting out your Ahmad Jamal shout out in the chat. But thanks to Kelly and Yalie for being generous with their time. And I don't know if you're still up for it, but they also offered to jump into the chat, and I can leave the stream open so that they can join in the chat and answer any questions that you still had. I think that's all. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who showed up online. And I wanted to, it's awkward to, I'm going to switch back to you so we can say bye properly.
Yeah.
Bye. Properly.
Bye. Thank you so much for all the generous questions and for showing up on a Tuesday night in Zoom land or YouTube land. We really appreciate this.
Yeah, truly. Thank you so much for coming. Really enjoyed the questions, and thanks again to FSU, Marty, Rob. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marty and Rob. Woohoo, MVPs, and FSU.
Thank you, Kelly and Yalie and everybody in the chat. And I'm going to also just say that this whole lecture series is possible because of the support we get from the College of Fine Arts at FSU. And also, if you have any questions or any thoughts that you want to send our way, you can find us at artsresearch.fsu.edu. And like I said, I'll leave the chat going. So hopefully we'll see Kelly and Yalie there, and hopefully we'll see all of you in person soon. Thank you.